We're really honored to have you join with us tonight for the Simi Valley Interfaith Council. And I really liked the slide that said we are building community in Simi Valley through learning about different faith groups and cultures, and getting to know people and getting to know different approaches and understandings of life. So we're really honored tonight to have Mr. Greg Elliot with us. And he's going to talk about his Buddhist traditions, the Higashi Honganji traditions, and explain the culture, the history, and the community here in the greater Los Angeles area. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. A quick bit about me, and then we'll get into the slideshow. I was born a farm boy in Eastern Washington and grew up Presbyterian. And in fact, my sister is still a Presbyterian minister when she's not being a UCC minister. When I came to Los Angeles, I fell in love with and married a woman from Japan. And we used to go to the Higashi Honganji Temple with her parents downtown. And the more time I spent there, we used to go for what I jokingly called the high holy days of Buddhism, Buddha's birthday, and Obon, which is a festival of the ancestors, where there's lots of food and lots of dancing and lots of fun. But the more I listened to what Rinban and the others had to say, the more impressed I was. And it was, the turning point for me was 9/11. We were in a small service the Sunday after 9/11, and how could anybody talk about anything else? And what Rinban said was to tell us a story about a coffee table book he had written by one of the astronauts on the first shuttle that included astronauts from like 7 continents. And as he told the story that's in the book, the first time around, they're going, "There's my city, that's where I'm from." And the second orbit, they're going, there's my country. And the third orbit, there's my continent. And by the time they'd all been in orbit for one day, they all realized this is one very small place and we're all in this together. And that was his message the Sunday after 9/11. And I turned to Marin and I said, we got to start coming here more often. And we joined the temple, and we've been, my idea was to expose our daughter to both of her cultures, to Buddhism and to the little UCC church in Simi Valley. And she's grown and gone and lives in Seattle now, but we continue to keep one foot in both. Okay. The presentation tonight will, as the screen says, this is an introduction to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Jodo Shinshu is Pure Land Buddhism, of which Higashi Honganji is a part. We're going to go over a brief history of Buddha's life, which probably many of you got at least some of in some 8th grade comparative religion class. The rise of Pure Land Buddhism, which is part of what Jodo Shinshu is, and where our temple fits into the world. And I need to officially start this, don't I? Buddha was born in Lumbini, which, if you see on this map, is what is now the border of what is now currently Nepal and currently India. What surprises me about his birth is that for one of the most influential human beings ever to walk the earth, we are a little unsure about when exactly he lived. The most recent archaeological digs that I'm aware of in 2013 indicated that happened a little earlier on this timeline, probably closer to 600 BCE than 400 BCE. But again, it's a little surprising that we don't know that much. Buddha was born, he was not born Buddha. Buddha means enlightened one. He was born Siddhartha Gautama about 2,500 years ago. He was born a prince. His father was a king in a small but very prosperous kingdom. And Siddhartha grew up in essence, a palace that was a city unto itself. His mother died shortly after he was born. He was raised by his aunt, who became his new mother. And a soothsayer, when he was born, came to his dad and said, your son is going to be either a great holy man or a great leader. And Dad said, I don't know about the holy man thing. I would rather see him be a leader. And for reasons Dad thought were going to work, he isolated Buddha and did not allow him to see old people, sick people, hungry people. He gave him a life of prosperity within the walls of this city that was the palace. And for a while, that worked out very well. Buddha got married. He had a child. He lived the life of a prince. But curiosity got the best of him. And he said to his chariot driver one day, hey, sneak me out. I want to see what the rest of the world looks like. And chariot driver said, okay, dude. And what Buddha saw was a beggar, a sick person, a dead person, and a holy man seeking enlightenment. And he said to his chariot driver, what is all this? And his chariot driver said some version of, sire, this is the real world. And Buddha was so shocked, so upset that he left. He renounced his kingdom. He left his wife. He left his child. And he, for 6 years, walked the Indian countryside looking for answers. He fell in with more than one small religious group looking for one that seemed to match what it was he was looking for. He fell in with a group of aesthetics. And if you know anything about aesthetics, you know that they are the people who say anything that's good is bad for you. The head of the aesthetics that he fell in with convinced him that if he were truly, truly to become holy, he would be able to live on 1 grain of rice and water a day. And Buddha tried it. And he became so emaciated that he was found by a milkmaid along the side of a stream, very near death and almost literally unable to move. She gave him a bowl of rice milk and it revived him. And I don't know if she was whispering in his ear, there's a better way, but he decided there was. And he began to eat again. He began to revive himself again. The aesthetics that he was with said, dude, this is not the way, we banish you. And he said, okay, I will find my own way. He wandered a little bit more once he'd regained his strength, and he found a fig tree. And he said to himself, a papala tree, known later as a Bodhi tree. Notice the similarity between the word Buddha and the word Bodhi. Bodhi tree is where he was enlightened. Buddha is the enlightened one. But he sat under this tree and said, I'm going to stay here until I figure this out. Now, he was on the edge of a small farming village, and the moms in that village said to their kids, you see the way that man is dressed? He's educated. You go take this sandwich to him and you listen to anything he has to tell you. And the kids would gather, and if Buddha was meditating, which he spent most of his day doing, they would bring food and sit and wait quietly until he arose from his meditation, and he would say, hi kids, gee, thanks for all the food. Today's lesson is applied physics. And that went on for 40 days. And on the 40th day, he was sitting under a tree, probably very much like these. These trees are venerated now. This is probably not the tree he sat under, because that was 2,500 years ago. And this tree, this papala tree, is very old. But it was probably one kind of like that. Anyway, for 40 days, he sat under this tree. And on the 40th day, he said, I get this. I see what this is. I understand. And over the course of that, according to the story, that happened about 2 in the morning. And from 2 in the morning until dawn, he asked himself a number of questions. One of them was, do I share this with anybody? Can I share this with anybody? Or does everyone have to find their own way, like I did? And as he was meditating literally on this, the kids were very quietly gathering for breakfast. And one of the things they had brought that morning was a bowl of figs. So when he emerged from his meditation, his night-long meditation, the kids said to him, you look different. You are glowing. What happened? And that was when he decided, okay, I'm going to try telling him. And he took this bowl of tangerines and he said, everybody take a tangerine. Now, before you eat it, take a look at it. Look how beautiful it is. Look at the shape. Feel its roundness. Notice the color of the leaves against the color of the skin. Now, as you break it open, smell that aroma that arises and how tantalizing that is. And as you peel your tangerine and take off a section and put it in your mouth and bite down, be aware of this flavor that explodes in your mouth. Now, while you're looking at this tangerine, think about this. Where did this tangerine come from? Well, your mom bought it at the farmer's market. Where did that come from? Well, the farmer picked it from his tree. Where did that come from? Well, the sun and the rain nourished that tree and until it could produce tangerines. Where did that come from? Well, the soil had to be tilled. And Buddha, in telling this story, said, if you go back and back and back, looking at this tangerine in your hand, you can see the beginning of the universe. That is supposedly the first Buddhist lesson. Buddha left, he found those aesthetics and he said, hey guys, I think there is a middle way between starving yourself on 1 grain of rice a day and living the life of luxury that I came from. I think there is a middle way. And that way can be summed up as be called the 4 noble truths, which are all life contains suffering. The cause of suffering is ignorance. The way to overcome ignorance is wisdom. The path to wisdom is the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are the tenets of Buddhism, the tenets of all Buddhism. Buddha went on, some of those ascetics followed him and said, dude, you've got it right. And as he continued to travel through the countryside and to speak, more began to follow him. More acolytes began to follow him. He spoke to huge crowds in the country. He spoke to crowds in the city. He spoke several times a day. And it is said that Buddha could look at you. Were you wealthy? Were you a family man? Were you a widow? And he could create a lesson specifically for you. And in doing this several times a day, 7 days a week for 45 years, Buddha delivered thousands and thousands of lessons. He died in his mid-80s on his deathbed with his followers all around mourning their loss. He said, if what I've taught you works for you, do that, follow that. If this doesn't work for you, find your own way. But for most of his followers, what he said and what he preached, for lack of a better word, is what they believed and what they followed. And Buddhism began to spread. It spread from India, north and east, through Tibet, through China, and eventually to Japan, and south into Sri Lanka, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. We'll come back to a famous Vietnamese Buddhist a little bit later. This is how Buddhism began to spread throughout the world. About 500 years after Buddha, roughly 100 BCE, Buddhism divided into 2 major sects. There is the Theravada, which is the original Buddhism. They are considered more conservative. They follow the teachings of Buddha and only his teachings. If Buddha didn't say it, it's not part of Theravada. They follow the Eightfold Path. They work to overcome greed, ignorance, and hatred, and to become enlightened and to obtain nirvana. The other half, the half that began about 100 BCE, is Mahayana. Mahayana, my short version is, Mahayana thought Buddhism was a little dry, and they thought it needed a few bells and whistles. They needed a little extra stuff. And they came up with what is known as the Pure Land movement. The Pure Land is, there are even two thoughts on this. The Pure Land is either the place you go when you die, if you are a devout Buddhist. This is crossing over. This body of water, all these people are on their way to the Pure Land. And there's lots of thoughts about when we are closest to the other side, when it is the most sacred days of Buddhism. There's a great deal about that we won't go into tonight. This is Buddha sitting under his Bodhi tree and being enlightened and blissful forever. And these are all the people that are also there in Buddha's presence, enlightened and blissful forever. The other thought about Pure Land Buddhism is it is not a place to go after you die, but a destination in this life. a way to become enlightened in this life. And we'll hear a little more. That is a journey that is not a destination. It's a journey that's very much 2 steps forward, 1 step back. A big part of Mahayana Buddhism is the idea of Dharmakara. And here's the short, again, my version of the story of Dharmakara. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a king named Dharmakara. And Dharmakara, by the way, means keeper of the traditions of the Buddha. So there's a little tip off there in just his name. He was a king, and he said to this other Buddha, I want to be a Buddha like you. I don't care about being a king anymore. I want to be a Buddha like you. And the Buddha said, okay, I'll help you do that. Dude, that might take a while. And he said, okay, that's okay with me. That's okay. And as the story goes, Dharmakara studied Buddhism for ages of kalpas, which translates into thousands and thousands of years. He made 48 vows, and the essence of those vows is a lot like the story I told you at the beginning that Rinpoche told me, that story of we're all in this together. That is a theme that's going to keep coming up in Buddhism and even in this presentation tonight. Dharmakara's vow, of the 48 vows, the one that is considered the most essential is his 18th, is very wordy, but you'll get the idea. He said, if I should attain Buddhahood, yet sentient beings of the 10 directions who aspire to be reborn in my land with wholehearted faith and joy, even having just 10 thoughts of my name, if they would not be reborn there, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. Back to that idea of we're all in this together, or that saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. This is sort of the reverse of that. Until everybody's happy, I'm not happy. He made one distinction and one little coda. The only exceptions are those who have committed the 5 great violations and those who have slandered the right dharma. In other words, if you are trying, I'm gonna pull you in with me, and until we are all there, none of us are there. And Dharmakara, over thousands of years, became Amida Buddha. Who is Amida Buddha? He is the all-knowing, all-seeing, all-loving, eternal version of Buddha. I got to tell you, that sounds like a god to me. That sounds like a deity to me. Officially, he's not. I don't know what the difference is, but officially, Buddhism, as you may know, is a philosophy, not a religion, because Buddha was not a deity. Although Amida Buddha kind of sounds like it. Anyway, Buddhism. By the way, this is more on this later. This is my home temple. This is Amida Buddha. I was looking for a larger picture of just him. I couldn't find one. If you look very closely, you can see he has this halo. And the halo is made of 48 rays extending from his head, and those are his 48 vows. Anyway, Buddhism traveled to Japan about 550 AD. And this, by the way, this is the Golden Temple of one of the famous temples in Kyoto, an absolutely transcendental place. There are temples in Kyoto on practically every block, and a number of them have been there for hundreds of years and are famous, but it is truly a place where one can feel enlightened when you're there. The founder of the Jodo Shinshu movement of the Mahayana movement this is a little bit like Presbyterianism in a lot of ways. The founder of that movement was Shinran Shonin, and Shinran Shonin is to me the Martin Luther of Buddhism. He was born in 1173. This is not a baby picture. This is him when he was older. But a little bit about Shinran. He was from a fairly wealthy family. He was orphaned. And at age 9, he said to his uncle, I want to go be a monk at the Buddhist temple. And his uncle said, okay. And he came to Mount Hiei. This is Mount Hiei, again, one of those temples just outside of Kyoto that's still there hundreds of years later. And he was a monk here for 20 years, and he studied Buddhism and everything about Buddhism. And he said, much like Martin Luther, I don't think we're doing this right. I don't get this. I don't think this is what Buddha had in mind. And he left. And he left and he went on his own spiritual journey. He found this temple, which again is in Kyoto and still there, and did his own, I'm going to sit here for 40 days until I figure this out. Coincidentally or not, he was the same age, 29, as Buddha was when Buddha left his palace and went on his journey and sat for 40 days. By the way, this glass, this picture is taken through the Starbucks that is now next door to this. Probably could have taken a better picture without the glass, but anyway, this is again one of the places that's revered in, except not quite so revered that they wouldn't build a Starbucks right next to it. But anyway, he sat there and he meditated, and in his meditations, he determined he should go find this teacher named Honen. Now, a little bit about Buddhism at the time. At the time, if you were a Buddhist, you lived on that mountaintop. You excluded everybody else. You did not associate with the fishermen because they killed fish and you were a vegetarian. You did not associate with the farmers because they killed the cows and the goats and the chickens. And you turned your nose up at them and you just practiced Buddhism with other Buddhists. And Honen had already said, I don't think that's a good idea. I think this should be for everybody. And Honen was already preaching to the masses when Shinran came to him. And the two of them, Shinran was technically his student along with other students, but they worked together and they preached to the common people together, and they preached what is called the Nimbutsu. The Nimbutsu is Namu Amida Butsu. And if you notice, Amida, the name of the god Amida, is right there in the middle of the name of the Buddha. Amida is right there in the middle of it. There are more than one translation in English. The most common is I take refuge in the Buddha. The one I prefer is I bow before the Buddha of infinite wisdom and infinite compassion. Back to that message that is in that 18th vow. Anybody who comes and tries this and says my name, I'm gonna take along with me when we go. The Nimbutsu was not accepted by traditional Buddhists. This is back to comparison to Martin Luther nailing those complaints on the church door. And they were not happy that the Nimbutsu movement was growing, because it was growing with the common people. You only got so many Buddhists sitting around, in those temples high on a hill. But the common people were really learning more about Buddhism and following it, and the traditional Buddhists felt threatened. As it happened, coincidentally, this happens more than once, by the way, in Buddhist history. Coincidentally, two concubines of a powerful lord in the area came to two of Honen's monks and said, "What is this about the Nimbutsu?" The Nimbutsu, and they told them, and the two concubines went back to their lord and said, "We just learned about this stuff." He did not like this at all. He complained to the official Buddhists, and they said, basically, this is our excuse. They beheaded those two monks. They defrocked Honen and all of his followers, including Shonen, and they ostracized them. They cast them out and made sure that they were in far-flung, not very nice places to live and far away from each other. Honen died in exile. But 5 years later, as the winds were beginning to change politically, oh, by the way, Shinran Shonen, during those 5 years, continued to preach to the masses, to the farmers, and he was married, he had children. He said, "I am neither holy man nor layman. He called himself foolish, bald-headed one. I am foolish, bald-headed one, but I'll tell you what I think I know." After the exile was reversed, after his priesthood was restored, he was reluctant to go back to Kyoto for a while because politically it was unsafe to do so. But he did eventually come back. He lived with his daughter. He lived until he was 90, and he wrote work after work after work after work. And those works became the foundation for Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, which is the most popular form of Buddhism in Japan today. One of the things he said that goes back to that 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing we were talking about. Shinran said, "Some days when things are just right, I get a glimpse of what this can be, what is this supposed to be, and I feel enlightened. And then the next day, it's all gone. And I thought, there's a guy I can follow. there's a guy who thinks like me. Okay. He died in 1263 at the age of 90, but and he said, much like Buddha did, if what you don't go find your own path, you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to. And they said, no, we're taking your writing and we're forming Honganji. Now, here's a quick history of that form of Buddhism, which is the form of Buddhism that my wife and I follow. Buddhism in Japan was at the time of Shinran and for generations, centuries afterwards, very, very powerful. And in fact, it got a little too powerful. And people said, this is Shinran again. In Japan, temples are called family temples. Most of them are quite small. Most of them just have the locals who come to them. And the priesthood, for lack of a better thing to call it, is passed on from father to son, and now from father to child. Could be son, could be daughter. And that happened with Shinran Shonin too. The founders of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, the leaders of those foundations were his relatives. And in 1602, there were two brothers, both descended from Shinran, that both were, there's a lot of different stories. One story is mom liked the younger brother better, even though the older brother should have been the one to succeed. One story is the older brother was kind of going off on some tangent some way that wasn't quite what the others wanted to do. And there was a powerful shogun, Tokugawa at the time, who thought they were too powerful. They were too powerful and they needed to be split up, and B, saw an advantage in doing so. And again, one of the stories is, went to the older brother and said, you know what, you split off from your brother and I'll set you up with your own temple, your own everything, and you'll be fine. And that's what happened. And the two became, on the east, Higashi, which means east, and on the west, Nishi, which means west. And they continued, both of them that now supported, continued to grow. This is the Higashi Honganji main temple. This is the founder's temple, the temple for Shinran Shonin. It's called the Honzan, which means basically the mothership. In Kyoto, it is hard to grasp how huge this building is. These are people right down here. This is one of the largest, if not the largest, wooden building in the world. If you set it on a football field, it would get not quite to each end zone and be a little wider than the sidelines. This is one huge building. I have been there for on a very cold November day for one of the high holy days of when there were 3,000 people inside. And that again is a transcendental experiment. They let Westerners like me sit in chairs because the service is very, very long. Everybody else is sitting cross-legged on the floor. I don't know how they do that. But anyway, moving right along. The Honzan is still the mothership for the temples that are in America. The temples that are in America are called the North American District, and moving east, they start in Hawaii. There's a temple in Berkeley. There's our temple in Los Angeles. There are temples in West Covina and Newport Beach. There's an affiliated temple that's not officially part of it, but in Chicago. That's how far east they go. There's a good, without getting into any details, we don't need to tonight. There's good news and bad news about that. The good news is we are supported by this massive organization. The bad news is things still kind of need to be done the way Japan says they need to be done, even though we're in a different country with a different culture. But moving right along. This is the way the temple looks downtown now. The Higashi Honganji Buddhist Temple was built in 1904, the original one, on 3rd Street in Little Tokyo, on 4th Street in Little Tokyo. The first one was on 4th Street. It changed location several times. It was in Boyle Heights for 50 years. It returned to Little Tokyo in 1976 at this location, which is on 3rd Street. Bishop Norito is still Rinban. Rinban means head reverend, and Bishop Norito is still he is the bishop for the North American district and the head reverend for this temple. This, by the way, is the Nishi Temple, which is a short walk from the Higashi Temple, also in Little Tokyo. And there's a close relation between our temples, even closer than most, because the head reverend at this temple is married to one of the reverends at our temple. So Nishi and Higashi have lots of family barbecues together. Anyway, this is a slightly different shot of what the inside of the temple looks like. This is the altar. On those high holy days, there will be a priest behind each of these seats. On just any given Sunday, it might be just one or two. There are ways that Buddhist temples in America are very much like a church. These look like pews because they are. There are no pews in Buddhist temples in Japan. We have a choir that sings songs. We have a Dharma message that is very much like a sermon. Neither of those things would you find in a temple, in most temples in Japan. And we do things for the community like help feed the homeless. Ways that a Buddhist service would be different. These are incense burners. And during the service, during the chanting, usually everyone comes up one at a time. There's a place to make a little offering, to offer some incense, and to bow before Amida Buddha. Again, he's not a god, and you're not asking him for anything because that's not the way he works. You're just up there saying, "Hey, Buddha, how you doing? Thanks for all the messages." And those are ways that a Buddhist service would be somewhat different from a Christian service. For any one of you out there looking for a spiritual path, you might consider looking at, there were for me, even continuing to attend services at the UCC Church in Simi, there are still for me ways that Buddhism reaches me and ways that it enlightens me and inspires me. And if that works for you, it might be something you might want to look at. The major ideas of Buddhism are mindfulness, that first lesson that Buddha taught. Pay attention to what's happening to you now. Buddha would frown upon all of us eating our breakfast while reading the paper, for example. It's like, no, do one thing at a time. One of the other major tenets of Buddhism is acceptance. Back to that, all life contains suffering. Acceptance of the way things are. Everything is changing, Buddha said. Everything is constantly in flux. And when we try to keep things from changing, we suffer. Buddha talked about grief. Grief is a natural process when you lose someone you love. But if that grief continues for too long, it becomes suffering. And you would suffer less if you could accept what has happened and moved on. Now, one of the common misunderstandings about Buddhism is that acceptance means we sit around and we gaze at our navels and we say, let's accept everything the way it is. And that doesn't take into account what is called now engaged Buddhism. I'm going to show you a very quick little snippet of a Buddhist priest from Texas talking about engaged Buddhism. This woman, I've heard her speak more than once. She is amazing. And this speech that she's giving here was just after the election, which would be obvious. But the things that she says resonate literally today every bit as much as they did when she said this.
I don't think we can hear it.
Let's start this over. Thank you for letting me know. Let's try this again.
Dear Dharma family, hello. I am Mielke Kane Barrett from Houston, Texas. Today we received, finally, word that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would be our next executives in the coming year, 2021. Certainly, we are happy and pleased with this result. And for the moment, we can experience joy and happiness around a change that is coming up. However, it's important for us to understand that nearly half of us in this country voted for a return of Donald Trump to the White House. And what does that suggest to us? That we are truly in a very divided country. We don't understand each other. And these days, it's hard to speak to each other without getting into heated arguments and disagreements. There's something that I think we as bodhisattvas who practice Buddhism must be prepared to do. We cannot look at Biden and Harris as our saviors. It is time for us all to recognize that as citizens of this country, we must be involved. We must persist in indicating to our representatives what it is that we want to see. And we have to be able to work alongside them to make sure that our plans and desires are implemented. And as Buddhists, we must embody the bodhisattva spirit, the bodhisattva path, and recognize our mission to carry the Buddhist teachings to all beings. Because we cannot look at over half of our country and say, that's not me. It is us. We are all connected, and it is incumbent upon us that we take on this task of sharing the Dharma and making our world a better place for all beings, to make our land a safe haven for all of us, and to recognize the being in each one of us, the Buddha nature in each one of us, that we are not different. We suffer in the same manners in different arenas, to be sure, but we all suffer, and we all find ways to overcome. So let us be inspired and driven to embody the principles of our Buddhist teachings and share them with the world so that we can truly become the Buddha's Pure Land. And remember, the Buddha does not see difference. He sees neither this one nor that one. All are the same. And that is a principle I am certain that we can all enact within our lives. So let's go forward. Let's get involved. Let's create the country we want to see. Thank you.
There are other examples of engaged Buddhism. We all know what happened with George Floyd sometime after that minister had made her statement. And here's what some Buddhists are doing about that. Pamela Ayo Yatende and her colleagues have created the Buddhist Justice Reporter, the George Floyd Trials. This is what she says is her purpose: an engaged Dharma practice project that may offer a constructive interruption and inject a fierce and wise compassion into all of this. I like the way she puts those words together: constructive interruption and fierce and wise compassion. They intend to do this by writing about the trial of the police officer charged with Floyd's murder, and in fact they did. This is Thich Nhat Hanh. He has written over 30 books. He's elderly and not in the best health now. I've had the opportunity to listen to him speak a couple of times. He wrote among other things he wrote Living Buddha, Living Christ, which is a comparison of Buddha's life to Christ's. He wrote Old Path, White Clouds, which is where the story of the tangerines comes from. And he said it, he is credited with inventing the term engaged Buddhism. And when he was asked about it, aren't you Buddhists just supposed to be gazing at your navels? This is what he said. All Buddhism is engaged Buddhism. If it's not Buddhism. He went on to say this: mindfulness must be engaged. Once we see that something needs to be done, we must take action. Seeing and action go together. Otherwise, what is the point of seeing? That is the end of my presentation. And I guess if there are any questions or comments, we can deal with those now.
That was fantastic. Thank you. That was really interesting, dynamic, and the slides were great. So thank you for doing that. And I will see what questions are coming in. Let's see. Oh, it's not yet. But I have a few as they start to come in. So I guess people can put their questions in the Q&A. And let me ask you what I have to begin with. Is there a specific ritual or learning that a person has to do in order to become a Buddhist, or it's just taking it on?
No, it's I suppose it's like joining any church. You just go in and Bryn and I attended. We did become members, but we attended for a good long time before that. We attended a lot of the classes. Here's an interesting thing about an interesting silver lining to the pandemic we're in. There's a class that a few of us teach. There's a group called the Dharma Seeds, which are basically, we went through 3 years of training to become sort of acolytes to the ministers and be able to help them out. And we now do things like teach the coffee and Dharma classes. And there's a rotation of us that do that. So I come up every 3 months or something. And there are other classes that are taught by some of the ministers in the temples. And when we went to Zoom, we got members from Berkeley join those classes, members from Chicago join those classes. And it was like, this is a silver lining. This is something that we could not have done. But those classes, when I started, those classes are where I began to learn about Buddhism. The first class I took was the Tanisho. The Tanisho are the writings of Shinran Shonin. It's basically the Talmud. A long time after Buddha, this guy sat down and said, "Oh, here are the things I think that are important." And the Tanisho class grew into Coffee and Dharma when we finished studying the Tanisho. But there are classes, there are ways that once if you choose to become involved, you can learn more about Buddhism. There are classes every Tuesday. Let me get this right. Every Tuesday night and every Thursday morning. And then the Coffee and Dharma is once a month before the service begins. So if you're interested, beyond just coming and seeing what a service is like, there are ways to learn more about Buddhism.
Okay, we have some questions. So one is, what's the difference between Nishi and Higashi?
That's an interesting question. That was almost 400 years ago that Takegawa split them up. And if you go to a Nishi temple, some of it will look the same and some of it will seem quite different, because over those 400 years, the chanting itself, the chanting is in Chinese and Japanese. So even most of the people who speak Chinese don't really understand what they're chanting. It's sort of a meditative thing, but the chanting is different, even though the words are the same. The chanting itself, the melody, the rhythm is different at a Nishi temple than it is at a Higashi temple. And some of the things they believe, about the Pure Land, some of the things they believe about, that have shifted. It's like twins. If they lived 2 different places, they would begin to have different lives. So there are some differences. but it's largely the same.
And another question someone asked is, how does meditation work into your practice?
The meditation is not followed as part of the practice with Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. It is with Zen and with others, but not with Jodo Shinshu. We do have meditation classes at the temple, but it's because again, lately there's been a great interest in meditation from all kinds of people who may or may not be Buddhist. But meditation in itself, and there are meditation classes that you can join now online, but that is not a part of a Higashi service. Meditation is not part of it, beyond the chanting, which is rather meditative because you don't know what you're saying anyway. So
I'm going to ask you the next one. Give me 1 second to close the door. Sorry about that. That's life going on, like we said. This one is, could you explain more fully what Dharma exactly is? For example, when you speak of coffee and Dharma, Dharma talks, what do you mean by Dharma?
Dharma is the message. One of the tenets of Buddhism is basically, I'm going to paraphrase just to save time. I believe in the Buddha. I believe in the Dharma, which was Buddha's message. I believe in the Sangha, which is the congregation. These are the three tenets of Buddhism. There's Buddha himself, there's the messages he delivered, and there's the people we share them with. So the Dharma is the message.
Okay, and then let's see. I wanted to ask, let me just see if there's more. Oh, that's exactly what I was going to ask. The next question. So this person asked, and this was on my list as well. What role do women and children have within the religion? And mine was going to be also, and you had the woman speaking, are women and men able to participate equally?
Yes, they are. In Japan, even in Japan, which is a bit more patriarchal than we are here, women and children women especially are part of the service. There are women can, if you don't have a son, you can pass your temple down to your daughter. That didn't used to be true, but it is now. Here, the Rinban, the head reverend, is a man, but the head of the North American district is a woman. The head of the Higashi Temple in West Covina is a woman. She is the one who does, I like her classes best right now. There are no restrictions really on what women can do or how high women can climb in the ranks. The head of the Chicago Temple is a woman. So.
And also Willie wants to answer this question. So how do we do that?
Oh. Not sure.
On that? Can Willie answer that?
I think
Okay, well, till he pops in, they'll tell us. But at any rate, I was going to also ask: is the practice popular today among the younger generation, or have the younger people become more secularized, or is that the challenge that other groups face as well?
The younger people have absolutely become more secularized, and Japan, Higashi Honganji in Japan is suffering every bit in the same way churches in this country are suffering, which is they're disappearing. I think the figures are 50 UCC churches in this country close every year, and smaller temples in Japan are closing, and the Betsuin, which is the head temple, the temple in Little Tokyo, the Betsuin is a big, powerful temple that has funds and isn't terribly worried, but so they're not in danger of closing, but their numbers are shrinking. They don't have as many members as they used to. And the smaller temples within the North American district one of them is pretty much being supported by the Honzan. They don't have enough members to keep, if the Honzan were not supporting them financially, they'd have to close their doors. That's I think, I can't speak for Islam. I can't speak for any other religion, but absolutely in the same way that Christianity is turning secular, Buddhism is as well.
And then the next, so that ties in with that is, how are the children and the youth, are there, I know they have dancing and things, but how are they involved either here or in Japan or other countries?
I think the two of the temples, the Berkeley Temple and the West Covina Temple, have basketball leagues. And there are people who join just to get their kids into the basketball leagues. And I think that works really well. There are Dharma lessons for kids, and there's basically like any church would have. There's a group of teens and a group of younger kids, and there's a group of. I've given a few lessons to the. There's a mindfulness lesson for 4-year-olds that I gave that I absolutely love. You give a 4-year-old. It's a lesson in meditation. You give a 4-year-old a little stuffed toy. I think mine were little stuffed dragons I gave everybody. And they lay on the floor, and all they do is watch the dragon go up and watch the dragon go down and watch the dragon go up and watch the dragon go down. And this is for those of you who don't know, Buddha's first meditation was simply that. To meditate, Buddha said, you say, I am breathing in when you breathe in, I am breathing out when you breathe out. And that's all. That's a meditation I still use, especially in a quick little, anytime, somebody cuts you off on the freeway and then flips you off. It's like, okay, I am breathing in, I am breathing out.
So I don't see other questions. So maybe along the lines of, how has Buddhism enriched your life? So what does that even mean to be enlightened? I mean, how can we, maybe that will be the grand finale. What is that? You said it's 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, or 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. So what is that? Does it mean that it brings peacefulness, understanding, maturity? We talk about emotional maturity today. What is that? Or just knowledge and wisdom and
I'll give you an example of how I was able to apply a Buddhist lesson to my daily life. There's a Buddhist lesson. There's a lot of Buddhist lessons that I could go on and on and on, but I'll just tell you one. There's a Buddhist lesson that goes like this. We all get hooked. We all get angry. We all get upset. We all get frightened. We all get uncertain. We all get jealous. All of those, everybody, even the Dalai Lama, we're human. All those things are flowing through us. The first thing to recognize is that you are hooked. And the second thing to do is to let it go. And one day, I was having one of those, we've all had one of those very, very bad days. Can't find the car keys. There's no gas in the car when I do get in. 3 things go wrong before I even get to the pharmacy. And I'm walking in the door of the pharmacy, ready to take somebody's head off if they said, can I help you? And this little voice in my head said, do you want to be this angry right now? And I said, no. And I let it go. And it was amazing. It was like, oh my gosh, that really works. It's like, poof. I'm not angry anymore. I can let it go. And I think there are times when that 2 steps back thing, when I, and probably others, say, no, I don't want to let it go. I want to be, but right that minute, I just thought, no, I don't want to be angry right now. And I let it go. And it's, once you realize the positive effect that can happen, then you're looking for those hooks. You're watching for those hooks. You're waiting when you can say, I am breathing in, I am breathing out. Life goes on. And in a way similar to, I think, the prayer that Alcoholics Anonymous came up with, oftentimes is, I'm going to take a stand here. I'm going to let this go. And I hope I have the wisdom to know the difference between when I should be doing one and when I should be doing the other. Yeah. part of engaged Buddhism.
Oh, that was beautiful. That was very, very profound.
Thank you.
So any closing words, anything? I think you did a wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very enlightening.
Well, I'm glad if it had that effect.
Oh, very interesting.
Okay.
Well, I guess we want to thank everyone for coming and joining us. And we want to encourage you to come next month. It will be Islam Part 2 on September 22nd at 7. And again, this is a wonderful opportunity to learn from each other and to see the beautiful things of each religion, each culture, each path, each foundation to build our bridges. And like you said, to be unified in trying to make the world a better place and more cohesive in helping one another and finding our own spiritual paths. So thank you, Greg. It was nice to meet you. And thank you to our Simi Valley Interfaith Council, which is an awesome group. And I'm honored to be part of it. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.